The next item is to review and discuss wireless technology in public health requested by Brian Moss, 16 Ruthin Circle, Shrewsbury. Mr. Moss?
Okay, great. All right, thank you very much for having us for Labor Day weekend here, I appreciate it. My name is Brian Moss, 16 Ruthin Circle, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 8. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss wireless technology, its risks and impact on public health. My journey on the topic began over 3 years ago when I attended the Worcester Attorney General's Office Energy and Environment Listening Session in Worcester. It was a standing room only event with the Assistant Attorney Generals and Senator Moore in attendance as well. Citizens came from all around the area to talk about their concerns. Two main topics emerged, and citizens were given the opportunity to voice their concerns. First, many citizens got up and spoke about their opposition to the proposed fracked natural gas transmission pipeline, and that was what I was there for. When the Attorney General's office moved to the next topic, just as many citizens got up and voiced their concern on that next topic. It was a topic I was unfamiliar with, and would end up changing my perspective on wireless technology. The topic was about the health risks from EMF exposure. In this case, smart meters, but it also applied to the risks from wireless devices like cell phones, tablets, laptops. I'd never heard about the risks before, but right there in front of my eyes, citizen after citizen got up and shared their research that clearly identified the risks. It had a big impact on me, and I introduced myself to those folks. Little did I know CC was also there, only a few seats away from me. The folks I talked to told me to see what CC was doing in Ashland. While I was focused on other environmental issues over the next couple of years, I did some research on the topic and kept it on the back of my mind. When the new Beale School building was announced, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to share this information and see what could be done to protect the youngest in our town in our new kindergarten through grade 4 school. A year and a half ago, I attended the Beale Building Committee's Sustainability Public Workshop and raised the wireless safety issue as well as some ways to mitigate them. Several months ago, I attended another standing room only event, but this time it was here in Shrewsbury, our very own Shrewsbury Library, and facilitated by CC. CC brought together leading experts at our Shrewsbury Public Library for a forum on questioning the safety of our children's exposure to wireless radiation in school. This forum was standing room only again and was attended by many Shrewsbury parents concerned about the issues. After talking with the other parents, we felt it was important to bring this forward again to the Beale Building Committee. So in May, I requested to present this issue along with CC to the Beale Building Committee. However, my request to present to the committee was denied. And so that's why I'm here today. I'm happy that the Board of Health was open to hearing public input on this topic, and I believe you may find yourself in the position I was 3 years ago. It reminds me of the quote, "You may choose to look the other way, but you can never say again that you didn't know." Once I knew there was an issue, I couldn't look the other way, which is why I'm here today. We're very fortunate to have Cece Doucette from Ashland here today, as she's just an amazing wealth of knowledge on this topic, and I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you, Brian. It's an honor to be here with you today. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I didn't know there was anything up with wireless technology. In fact, in our schools, we kept hearing about the 21st century classroom and how we needed all this new technology for our students and staff to succeed. So our budgets had been cut to the bone, so we jumped in as parents and started doing fundraising to get iPads and Chromebooks and minis and smart TVs and wireless infrastructure that we kept hearing was what we needed. Then one night, a girlfriend of mine is an electrical engineer, and at book group, she was reading a book called Zapped, and she said, "It looks like there are health risks with wireless technology." And I made a mental note of it, and then not long after that, I read something else that inferred the same thing. So I'm a technical and professional writer by trade, and so I jumped in and started doing the deep dive. And if you do a cursory search as Wi-Fi safe, you will indeed find studies that were done that showed no harm. But when you get beyond that, you will find a compendium called the Bioinitiative Report. This is just the cover and the table of contents, but it summarizes thousands of studies that have been done all over the world indicating great biological risk. And evidence for damage to sperm and reproduction. It was actually when I opened up the peer-reviewed, published scientific studies on fertility that I decided I need to speak up on this issue. They've taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the multiple antennas turned on, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable in just 4 hours. And I had just bought my youngest child a laptop for Christmas, which of course she's using right on top of her reproductive organs. But if you go through the rest of the table of contents, children are more vulnerable. So this is a diagram from Dr. Om Gandhi at the University of Utah from an IEEE publication. If you hold a cell phone up to the head of an adult, the radio frequency radiation or microwave radiation penetrates about this far into the brain. On a 10-year-old child, it goes about 2/3 of the way across the brain. And on a 5-year-old child, it goes almost all the way across the brain. So we know scientifically that children are especially vulnerable to this microwave radiation. The studies also show great effects for fetal and neonatal. And you look at pregnant women, and they've got their iPads sitting right on the bump. They might be carrying their phones right next to the developing fetus. It has serious effects on autism. Dr. Martha Herbert, who founded the Autism Lab at Mass General, sees huge correlations between what we know with microwave radiation and this skyrocketing that we are seeing in autism. Electrohypersensitivity is, or electrical sensitivity, we are bioelectrical beings, as you guys being on a Board of Health know. Our brain, our heart, our lungs are huge electrical organs. And this radio frequency radiation is a constant pulse of microwave radiation. It goes on, off, on, off, on, off at billions of cycles per second. And it is dysregulating many of our biological symptoms. The good news is, once we start remediating and we simply choose hardwired technology over wireless, you just turn off the signals. And when you hardwire through an Ethernet cable, just like we've always done, like we do in our offices, all of our systems in our offices are typically hardwired because we know we get a much faster signal, our data is safer, the signal itself is more reliable, and all the privacy issues pretty much go away when your data is safely transferred through an Ethernet cable. So here's what the science is showing us, and what many people feel but have never been trained to connect the dots, that it's their exposures to microwave radiation that could be causing it. With the brain, headaches, that's a classic first symptom of microwave sickness, these headaches that our doctors can't seem to figure out where they're coming from. Insomnia is another big one for both children and adults. My house is completely hardwired. When I finally, 5 years ago, I didn't have anybody I could talk to on this issue, so I circled my tail for a while. But once I realized what the science was telling me, we hardwired my house. We got rid of all those decked cordless phones because that's like having your own private cell tower. In Europe, they make those in eco mode so that they only transmit radiation when a call is in play. But here in the US, we've not adopted that technology, and those sit there pulsing day and night at our loved ones. Same thing with the router. Anything that you've got wireless, from your mouse and your keyboard to your tablet to the baby monitors, the gaming devices, all of that, just hardwire it again, turn off the radiation, and you find that children and adults do start sleeping through the night again. Dizziness, difficulty concentrating, cognitive impairment is a huge issue with this, memory problems, fatigue. I had the wellness instructor for the Wayland Middle School call me yesterday, and she said, hey, it was summertime, I'm relaxed, I'm sleeping in, and I can't figure out why I'm so wiped out. And she went to a doctor who understands electromagnetic radiation, and it was the smartwatch that she had started wearing. She's wearing it to bed. And once she figured that out, she took it off, and her energy level came back. So it can be that simple. Tinnitus, the ringing in the ears, humming, sharp pains that people may get from their ears or from their phone. And then they become sensitive to noises all around them, not just the EMFs. Skin rashes, we have like little antennas in our skin, and this exacerbates that. I know of children where they put up a cell tower at a school, that their skin starts breaking out in rashes along with the headaches, the nosebleeds, the nausea, irritability, depression, anxiety, and it goes on, irregular heartbeats, chest pains, difficulty breathing. And then it can also do a number on our digestion because it affects the mast cells in the gut, tingling in the skin. So electrohypersensitivity is becoming more and more well documented in the scientific literature. We now know that this constant pulse of microwave radiation can open up the blood-brain barrier. So we have all this new neurotoxicity happening, especially among children, because their systems are still under development. And now when you're opening the blood-brain barrier, you have toxins going into places where they should not be going. So when Ashland Public Schools became aware of this, they didn't know what to do with it, because all we've heard from the industry is how great this is, right? All the innovation, all these benefits that we can have for customizing learning and so on. But when they read the legal fine print, I think that's where they realized they had legal risk exposure. Does anybody have an iPhone with you right now? If you can take it out for just a moment and go into settings, I'll show you where it actually says right in our devices. So if you have an iPhone and you can take it out, okay. So if you would go into settings,
Yeah.
and then just remember the acronym GAL, like this gal came to the health meeting today. And you go down just a little ways and hit general, that's the G. And then up at the top, hit about. And then scroll all the way down to legal.
Yep.
And what do you see at the bottom of legal?
RF exposure.
So there it is, RF exposure or radio frequency radiation. And in that legal fine print, it tells us two really important things. One, keep this device X amount of distance from your body, or you may exceed the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. And Dr. Abraham, I read your bio and you trained in India, right? In 2015, Dr. R.S. Sharma from the Indian government, he is the gentleman in India's government who recommends the public radiation exposure levels. He actually has done some of those sperm studies we spoke of. So Dr. Sharma came to the Massachusetts State House in 2015 because he has gotten India to take their public radiation exposure limits, which used to be where our FCC limits still are today, and he's brought them down 90% on paper. So that shows us with a little bit of political will that we can actually make some important changes to protect our society and ensure safe technology. The other thing that legal fine print says is to not only keep a distance from your body, and people are sticking them in their pants and their waistbands and their bras, but to use a hands-free option. And without directly telling us, the reason is that one device has 5 or 6 separate antennas in there that are constantly beaconing microwave radiation to make a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And we don't need that. If you absolutely have to have your phone on, don't leave it anywhere near your body. And turn off all those antennas except for the cellular one that you're waiting for a phone call on. Or if you're just waiting for a text, turn off the Bluetooth, turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the locator, turn off the hotspot. But we've been given no technology safety training on any of these devices. So when Ashland saw that, we became the first in the United States, it turns out, to even have this little sign laminated and hanging in all of our classrooms. And it says, turn off the wireless when you're not using it, because otherwise, even if nothing is making a handshake, it's still pulsing microwave radiation out. Industrial strength mesh Wi-Fi systems in our schools to connect hundreds of devices at once. And we should be protecting our children above all else. So, good on Ashland. They're still waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do, but at least they did a little training around this. So as I kept investigating this, I thought, surely somebody must have our backs on this, right? If the science is as bad as I'm finding in peer-reviewed published journals from all over the world, why don't we know about this? And then in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics put out this 59-page report called Captured Agency, How the FCC is Dominated by the Industries it presumably regulates. And it made me smile today to come in and see that you're addressing tobacco on your agenda today, because it says in Captured Agency that this is the big tobacco playbook all over again, but now it's big wireless. So this is the only safety testing that's ever been done. They took Sam, this specific anthropomorphic mannequin, with water-based gel in his head. They put a spacer, and then they put a phone up to it and said, how much heat does it take in a half an hour to raise the temperature of the gel inside Sam's head? That's all they ever did. They never tested this for safety, but they brought it to market. And so now we are living with FCC guidelines set in the 90s before we had wireless everywhere, and they never even tested it up against the head. So there's something in France with a Dr. Mark Arazi called PhoneGate, and it's just now happening here in the US too. I don't know if you saw in the last week, the Chicago Tribune has been doing an investigative report, and they started testing the phones to see if they met the FCC limits, and they don't. They are way over. And even with the Tribune's investigation, they kept a 2-millimeter distance. If you put it right up to your head, you're probably exceeding the FCC limits by like 11 times, and nobody has any idea. In November, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is our government's highest research branch, it's one of the world's leading research branches on toxins. They've been doing a 20-year study where they went in expecting to prove that cell phones were safe, because that was the technology of the day when they got started. And instead, they found clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage. And clear evidence is the highest categorization they can give. On the heels of this, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy came out with another major finding that corroborated everything in the NTP study. So we are beyond the point scientifically. We need to be taking action now to protect our children especially, but everybody deserves the right to know. So I brought this to Senator Karen Spilka. She's my senator in Ashland. I showed her, what the science was saying, and by then I had invested in a meter that allows us to measure microwave radiation. And if there was no radiation in the room here, we would just hear a little crackle confirming this $400 device is working. If it goes into green, that's where science is still investigating what the biological risks are, because there is no safe level of microwave radiation in the scientific literature. When it goes into yellow, that's where people maybe aren't sleeping well, getting headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, cognitive impairment. And in the red, we literally have thousands of studies linking this to cancers for children and adults, to infertility. We're down 50% on our sperm count right now as a nation. Autism, Alzheimer's. So just being in here right now with our ambient signals from our personal devices, as well as the infrastructure that's in this building, we are in a very toxic environment. So that's the bad news, but there's an awful lot of good news right now. So just this summer, I helped Representative Patrick Abrami up in New Hampshire come up to speed on this. He's an engineer, and he did the deep dive. They just got a law passed in New Hampshire to address EMFs, or electromagnetic fields, especially for health and environment, in light of what the industry is forcing upon us with 5G or 5th generation technology. So right now, all of our devices, when we're mobile, are operating off of 3rd and 4th generation signals from the big cell antennas. All that's left of the spectrum are these crummy little millimeter waves. They're tiny, and they can't go very far, and they can't travel through buildings very well. So in order for 5G to fly, and they're promising these fast downloads, they're promising us autonomous vehicles. Well, if you're going to have a car that's driving itself, it has to be able to connect to a cell antenna wherever it goes. So they are planning to put millions of small cell antennas inside our neighborhoods, every 2 to 12 houses. So you can literally wake up tomorrow with a cell tower right outside your bedroom window. It's already happening in Sacramento and other places where people are becoming ill. Burlington, Mass. just put in a small cell policy that's now being replicated throughout the country because they did something that caused Verizon to withdraw their small cell antennas. And at another time, I can walk you through that. The state of Oregon just passed a law with Senator Anderson, who is a public health nurse. And she is now having this law that asks their DPH to assess the independent science and make recommendations for the public and especially for children in schools. There was a federal lawsuit at the Face School right here in Southborough, and the first time in a U.S. court, they acknowledged that there are biological effects to this wireless radiation at the non-thermal level. You don't have to have heat to have harm. There's huge impact happening way below that. Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, others have already put exclusions in their policies because they long ago recognized that radio frequency radiation is a leading risk. So what happens is the industry comes in, signs contracts with our towns, and passes that risk liability onto you and onto me through that fine print in the phone. So there is much we can do, but as Brian said, we were so blessed to have this incredible forum right here at the Shrewsbury Public Library this spring. And in it, you will hear from Dr. Martha Herbert, who founded the Autism Lab at Mass General. She's a Harvard pediatric neurologist and scientist. You will hear from Dr. David Carpenter, who is from the University of Albany in public health. He's also a member of the World Health Organization. And you will hear from Dr. Ronald Melnick, who designed that $30 million U.S. National Toxicology Program that determined clear evidence of cancer and DNA damage. Maryland's Department of Public Health has already made the ruling that we should only be hardwiring our schools. The American Academy of Environmental Medicine has made the same recommendation. So there's an awful lot. Massachusetts is actually leading the nation with 19 bills right now. Several of them have already made their way through previous sessions, and I have worked with the Department of Public Health to create fact sheets. We did this 3 years ago, and I was told it would be released in 3 months. It's now been 3 years, and these have yet to see the light of day. So there was a cell phone fact sheet written in California back in 2009 that never saw the light of day when industry got in there. And Dr. Joel Moskowitz at the Department of Public Health at UC Berkeley did the Freedom of Information Act request. He was not given that fact sheet. So he got some lawyers at Berkeley to pro bono. They sued the California DPH, and the judge ruled that that fact sheet had to get released. That came out in December of 17. That should have been front page news all over our world. But because, as Captured Agency indicates, the telecom industry has a lock on our media. If they don't outright own the mainstream media channels, their advertising revenue keeps the media executives from running true investigative journalism on this. That's why that Chicago Tribune story about cell phones being way over the exposure limits is so important. So when Dr. Moskowitz at UC Berkeley found out that Massachusetts has had this cell phone fact sheet, and they're addressing Wi-Fi, they're addressing cell towers, they're addressing high voltage power lines, all of this man-made radiation in our own Department of Public Health. He contacted the Boston Globe and said, you may be interested in knowing that your DPH is sitting on information that the public has a right to know. So the Globe investigated, did a story in January, and people started calling into the DPH saying, yes, please release that fact sheet. We want to protect our loved ones. And instead, the DPH put something up on their radiation control website that says, basically, you don't have to worry about it. So I called a meeting on July 31st with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services. We had Senator Karen Spilka's office there. We had the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We had the Joint Committee on Public Health there, as well as an Undersecretary Lauren Peters and the gentleman who is the government liaison. So they are investigating what happened to that public health fact sheet. But in the interim, while we wait for public policy to catch up to the science, it is our moral obligation to protect our citizens and especially our children. So with the Beal project, that is the ideal opportunity to just run Ethernet cables when you're running your electrical wiring and put plugs in and hook up, and you get a much faster signal and the kids are safer, as are the teachers. As a physician, you may be interested to know that the European Academy of Environmental Medicine, since 2016, has had a protocol out there to treat people for electrical sensitivities. Shrewsbury was the first in Massachusetts at the public library to host a screening before this award-winning film Generations Apt was released, and now it's available to the public. We actually did a screening at the State House with Senator Julian Sear last summer, and it was run on a continuous loop down at the NIH when I was co-chairing a technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference last summer. I have had the privilege of working with some of the world's leading experts on this, and we have built the training. We can train your entire town in a half an hour. We've distilled the science, the risks, what other countries are already doing to protect their public, and it provides a little tip sheet that you can print out at the end. Literally, in a half an hour, we can train your entire town, your entire school district. And I wish that I had been here far enough in advance that you might have had time in your schedule to come out to Santa Cruz, California next week, where the first U.S. CME conference to train healthcare providers and first responders and public servants on what is wireless radiation. How do you recognize the symptoms? How do you diagnose it? How do you treat it? And most importantly, how do you prevent it? So this is the first time in the U.S., and I was so honored that they reached out. I have helped to coordinate the evening panels, and we will have one on policy featuring the Massachusetts bills that we have, the New Hampshire bill, and others around the world, because this is not a local issue. Brussels has already put a moratorium on 5G. Parts of Rome have put a moratorium on 5G. They refuse to be the guinea pigs because there has been no safety testing on this, and the industry is just forcing it in. But there's a lot of pushback, so you may want to check in with your planning or zoning board and see if the industry is already putting in permits for these small cell antennas, because literally you can wake up tomorrow with one outside your bedroom and then you have no control. Actually, 3 of the bills in Massachusetts address the pilot program that National Grid did for the utility smart meters out in Worcester. And that turned out to be quite a fraudulent project. They went way over budget, and they foisted these toxic radio frequency transmitting smart meters on everybody's homes and businesses without their informed consent, and people were getting very ill from them. So we thank you for your time. To hardwire an iPhone, I did this for my daughter at home when I figured this out. It's like a $30 adapter, the RJ45 Lightning to Ethernet adapter. You just plug it into an Ethernet cable that goes onto the back of your router. And then you go into the settings and you turn off all the antennas. So when my daughter did this, I said, so do something. And she went, oh my gosh, it's so much faster. And then I kind of watched her wheels turn, and she went, so if I'm running all of my internet connection through the cable and I've turned off those antennas, does that mean it doesn't eat into my data plan? And I said, that's right, because if she goes over budget, we make her pay out of pocket, right? So that's how I got a 15-year-old on board. But there's a similar Thunderbolt adapter for the MacBooks. A lot of the Android phones can be hardwired with a pluggable device. Same thing for the Chromebook. So this is not rocket science, but it is our moral obligation to protect our children, and there are many, many solutions out there once we tune in. So what I wanted to leave you with today is the agenda from that meeting with the Executive Office of Health and Human Services on July 31st, and a couple of other things. This is the film Generations Apt. This is a card from Dr. Hugh Taylor, who runs the OBGYN program at Yale. And he has done experiments with the mice, and he finds that when you expose the pups in utero, the mice come out looking like they have ADD, ADHD, just, off the wall inside their cages. This is our little nonprofit out of the UK that has the half-hour training, and this is my business card. And on the back of it, if you want a crash course, I encourage you, go take this little course. It's less than the cost of a movie ticket. We will work with you on bulk rates. We just want to help you educate your public. But on the back is my personal research repository called Understanding EMFs for Electromagnetic Fields. So feel free to use any of this as a launch point, but I do hope you will take this very seriously and do everything in your power to start protecting the public now, because the industry is moving fast and furious to take away local control from our towns and to put a cap on the licensing fees, where your town may have negotiated $800 to put up a cell tower in a public access way. They're now gonna lowball you for about 100 or two. So it's damaging our revenue stream and our health. But hardwiring to the premises will solve all of that. So I will leave you with this. And I would be honored to come back another time where we can really spend additional time answering questions and helping to connect the dots. And I apologize, I know if this is the
Thank
first
you.
you're hearing of it, it comes way out of left field.
While CC passes that out, she mentioned three things. So there's the three things that are applied to town right now are, one, the building of the Beal School, and they're in the design, and so there's still time to figure out these mitigation options for the new Beal School for the kindergarten through grade 4. The Selco Commission has also had on their agenda for many months, small cell infrastructure, which are the 5G towers. They're already working on the permitting process for these 5G cell antennas. That would be, what, every so many houses?
Every 2 to 12 houses.
And then they also have on their, Selco also has on their agenda the smart meter replacement project for Shrewsbury, which is a multi-million-dollar project to put the smart meters that we were just talking about, which was at the listening session 3 years ago. So I just wanted to mention that there are 3 current topics that this would apply to, so that's why we wanted to come before you, get some education on the risks, and hopefully we could figure out a way to help protect citizens and children and others.
And there are many, many people here to help you. The scientists, the doctors will be at your beck and call to help you get this information credibly out to the public. And then there's an awesome little book. It's like a scholastic book, which is great for children to understand why maybe we're choosing to hardwire in our homes, why we're not going to have wireless in our schools anymore. Just like a little scholastic book written by a woman in Australia who was a teacher, and then she went to work for her government in telecom and quickly put the two together. So she wrote this little book. It's a great little primer. It should be in all of our children's libraries, in our classrooms. Okay. Thank you so much.
We'd love to take questions, too.
Yeah.
I'm sure you might have a bunch, so we're definitely here to answer any that you might have.
Wow.
Well,
I know.
it's a lot to absorb
Yeah.
right now, and it's not something that's been out there publicly, as you said. I mean, I've not heard of any like widespread
Well, and you
effects
won't
of-
hear about it through mainstream media because it's pretty much run by the industry. But if you take the time to at least start investigating, you will be astonished at how much information is readily available once you proactively look for it. And be very careful where your source of information is coming from, because in big tobacco fashion, every time a good study is done, the industry takes it, spins it, allays their fears, and pushes their products. So just know that that's the game plan. But go directly to the peer-reviewed, published, independent science, and you will find the truth.
Okay, any questions?
I'm wondering if it would be possible to get, like, a handful of select articles that would be good for us to look at.
Yeah. So what I will do after I get back to my office today is I will send you the electronic copy of that agenda with Department of Health and Human Services, and I think it's in item 1C. You will see the scientific literature. Dr. Martin Paul has recently put out a publication about 5G and EMS, and he has pulled out 8 ways in which we know biologically this affects us, and he has the whole resource list right there with it, so that'll be a good one to just thumb through. Other
Okay,
questions?
so no other questions?
Yeah,
All
I
right.
think
And,
we'll look forward to the literature.
yeah,
Yes.
and I understand that you're in charge of one of the major hospitals in this area. Thank you for
Not
that.
really, but I love it.
In Cyprus, in the Mediterranean, they just pulled all the wireless out of the hospital. When my daughter broke her leg studying abroad in France, they did not allow wireless into the hospital. France already has a national law forbidding any wireless around preschools, nursery schools, kindergartens. So we are way behind the 8 ball in this country, and I'd love to share more of that information. All right? Thank
Okay.
you so much for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
coming.
And I'm right in Ashland, so happy to come back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Would you mind emailing those
Sure.
documents to me and I'll make sure the board gets them?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.